Hello, hello, hello. It's Stephanie here. Welcome back to the Rent to Rent Success podcast. Today, I'm joined by Athena Dobson. Athena is absolutely incredible. I was just recently speaking at her Girls in Property retreat, and I was absolutely blown away by the amazing women in her community and the substance of what we did on that day. I left feeling so inspired, and I think that's what Athena aims for. Athena is a property investor. She's founder of the Girls in Property community and retreats, host of the Girls in Property podcast. She left her full-time job in 2022 to go full-time in property. She actually started out in rent-to-rent HMOs. She's now doing rent-to-rent SA. And so, Athena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to actually be a guest on the podcast as opposed to a host. So I'm really excited for today.
Yeah, well, I am too, because I know that what you've got to say will really encourage people. So tell us, Athena, how you got started quite young in property, I think, and how did you get started, and what made you get started?
Oh, I like to think I was young. Was I young? Do you know what? Compared to some other people now who are like 18, 19 starting out, when you're sort of the 24, 25 years old, suddenly you're no longer that young anymore. But what basically happened to me was, like most, I used to have a full-time job because, let's face it, when you're at school, you go to school, you learn, and they tell you to get a job, to work your way through the job, get promotions, get a pension, and then effectively die, which is a bit more morbid when you think about it. But what happened to me was I was a premium travel consultant, and of course, back in March 2020, I think it was, COVID, of course, hit. And for me in my industry, like so many others, it was devastating. And I remember sitting there the day I got the call to say, that there's no work. There's literally no work for you. And it was a commission-based job. So therefore, my income overnight just vanished. And so in that moment, I had to think to myself, okay, what do I do effectively? So like what most people did, I spent a lot of time watching Netflix, watching Disney Plus, feeling a bit sorry for myself. And then I gave that about a 3-week window. And then I was literally on the couch one day, and this Facebook advert popped up. I don't know if any listeners have ever had this before, where a Facebook advert just pings. And it was for a property training course, which was online. It was a weekend, 2 days for £99 with a certain training provider. And I thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'm a bit bored of Disney Plus now. Why don't I go and do a bit of learning? Because I love to learn. That's my thing. I love to learn. And so I watched this, and effectively over those 2 days, found a little bit more about property, got educated, and then skip forward months and months down the line, where I started to fall in love with it, fall in love with the idea of making money, if I'm completely honest with you as well, and the way that you could make money without actually owning the assets and controlling them instead, which I'd never actually understood before until I did my training and learning and reading podcasts and books and all the free material you can possibly imagine. And then actually what I decided to do was then to start a rent-to-rent business, which I did, which was the rent-to-rent HMO model, which I know you and Nikki do so well. And therefore took it on that way, controlled the assets, built it up, and here we are, and then move on to SA. So yeah, it was all a minefield, really.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because I know a lot of people will see that this is possible to control assets and make money from property without buying it, but not take that next step forward. So tell us about that very next step. You heard this and you thought maybe you could do it. And how did you actually get started? How did you find that first deal?
Yeah, sure. So what actually happened was, the very first step was I started to reach out to other people within the property sector and industry. So I used to follow a lot of Facebook groups. I used to follow a lot of people on Instagram who were doing the things that I really wanted to do. And this is what I tell everybody to do. I don't know about you, Steph, but I think that the property industry particularly is one of the friendliest industries I've ever worked in. People are so warm and kind and open. And if you say to them, I'm just starting out, can you offer some guidance, some help? They're always willing to help. One of the people I actually reached out to then became my business partner, who is Sophie Foote, who I know you know really well. And Sophie was doing incredible things with a certain franchise called Rooms in the Southampton area. And I And I asked her, let's meet for coffee one day, which we did. And she was telling me all about the rent-to-rent HMO model. And I thought, this sounds like it could work really well. And because I was in Bournemouth and it was one of the areas that Sophie actually wanted to expand into, after months and months of conversations and Sophie telling me, look, leave your job, because I went back to full-time employment when the world went back after COVID. She goes, no, you can do it. You can do it. Had a little bit of funds saved up. I had enough to actually buy a share of the franchise by going into business with Sophie and therefore taking the Bournemouth territory. And so I had her to help guide me, but effectively I was the main leader of that business. So I went 5 days in the business and Sophie worked 1. So it was me who really did all the marketing, supercharging, agents, getting rejection. I was one who sort of went through that, as it were. But I think what I would say is to have that accountability partner who really believes in you and who gives you that confidence to say, yes, you can do that. And I think that when you're starting out on your own and you don't have that community aspect or that person doing that for you, you either give yourself the doubt in your mind because, let's face it, you don't know what you don't know. And so therefore you have doubt as a result of that. Or the people you surround yourself with, because they've never done it before, they then don't believe that you can do it. And so I think that for me was the turning point of just surrounding myself with the right people.
Absolutely. So true. Having the community is so important. Like you said, it's the whole person. It's not just here's the strategy. You need to encourage people, support people, mentor people. And I know that you do that. And you've got your property lifestyle accelerator, which helps people go from the beginning, like you did, to building up your portfolio like you are now. So what would you say is the biggest changes in your life since you were working 9 to 5 before, relying on one source of income, your salary, like most people, to now?
So I certainly work harder now than I did before, because when you have your own business, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It is literally, there are no shop windows or shop doors. It is just 24 hours. And I always say this, if you are going to decide to do this, you are not just a property investor, you are a business owner first and foremost. And as a business owner, you need to understand that you've got to really flame the fire, stoke the fire, I think it is, of doing that. But another thing I would say also that I've learned is my mindset has completely shifted. Like I don't know about you, Steph, but I sometimes reflect, let's say from like even a year ago, and I don't even recognize myself anymore. It seems to be that you just change, and progress as time goes on. And the thing for me now that I will never ever stop thinking or never ever stop saying is there are so many different ways to make money, so many different ways. So if a person, for example, has a job, and I'm like, yeah, but you could literally make money in your sleep. You could have this rent-to-rent HMO portfolio. You could have it, for example, where if you weren't able to take on the rent-to-rent, you could become a sourcer and therefore you could make money that way. You could become an affiliate and therefore you could have affiliations with various companies, for example. There are so many different avenues and like a spider web as to how to make money that the biggest thing I've taken away is I can't believe that I relied on one source of income for as long as I did. And I thank COVID for allowing me to step back, to take a breath and to go, there must be more to life than this. And also to give me that feeling that I never want to have again of feeling out of control and thinking, well, that source of income's gone. Now what do I do? Whereas if you have multiple sources of income, let's say that one of them falls down, or let's say that on a HMO, one of the rooms has a void, you therefore have other means to back up. So I have my serviced accommodation business. I now have a buy-to-let portfolio. I'm actually now going to be, for July, building out HMOs as well. I'm doing conversions on HMOs and building that up, as it were. So it sounds mad that that's happened in 2 years, but when you have that sheer determination, you take that leap and you only move forward, it can be done with the right mindset and the right people around you to really push you to get you there. It can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't take long, as I say, as you said, rather, with the right mindset. And that comes from having the right people around you, because when you see success all around you, it's so much easier for you to create that success for yourself.
Yeah.
So people come to you, Athena, and they want to get started in property and they join for mentoring and so on. And you've got your property lifestyle accelerator that takes them step by step through that process. What would you say are the 3 biggest mistakes you see people making in this area, getting started in property?
3 biggest mistakes. I would probably say that one of the mistakes I see people making is that they don't recognize the fact early enough, I would say, which stalls them, to recognize the fact that you can only get so much out of free information, I think. So for me, for example, when I first started, I was able to get my free information from podcasts. I was able to get it from books. I was able to get it from YouTube and Google. Fantastic. But to actually have taken me to the next step, I had to invest in myself and my education. So although I had obviously accountability partners and moving forward from that, I also got educated professionally. And I went with a certain training company and learned all about certain strategies as to how to get into property. And at the time, of course, I didn't have income. You know, I'm sure that most listeners can relate to this, where you see your costs going up and up, but your income actually going down because you decide to make the shift in this move. And it's a very scary place to be. But what you have to do is you have to believe that by making that actual investment in yourself and in education to push you forward, that's then what really propels you. So the first thing I would say is relying too heavily on free information is a mistake, I would say. I think it's good to get out there. Mistake is such a difficult word, because I don't think mistake, like, it's almost like a difficult word to use. I would say that what my advice would be for people starting out is probably a different way I would word it, is I would say one thing I didn't do and learn from me in doing this is I rushed the whole process. And it was constantly about getting the next deal, getting the next investor, it was constantly like the next. And what I never did was I didn't just stop to reflect and actually enjoy the process. And what happens is you almost lose yourself, because you forget your why and you forget why you're actually doing anything that you're doing. And what then happens is you end up working day in and day out, but you therefore, there's almost like no end in sight, and you also forget why you're doing it in the first place. And I got to that stage, and I definitely 100% have experienced, if not 1, but 2 sets of burnout, because you feel like it's relentless and you just have to keep going. Whereas if you just stop and take a breath and realize, why am I doing this? I want to enjoy the process. I want to take a breath. It's just such a nicer place to be. And that has been one of my biggest learnings, my biggest lessons, which is so hard when you're driven as an entrepreneur, because we're all wired differently, us entrepreneurs. We all think there is more to life than what life gives us. And so for me, it was to really to do that, I would say, and to really enjoy the journey. And then the other one that I would say, biggest mistake, I tell you actually what a biggest mistake would be, because I've watched it happen a lot of times. I think that what can sometimes happen, which is what I've seen with quite a few people, is that they give it a go and they try and they push forward. But what happens is all of this doubt starts to creep in, because I don't know if you agree with this, Steph, like, people can sometimes say, oh, get rich quick in property, 90 days, get rich quick. You can be financially free in 30 days. Like, for me, that's absolute rubbish. Like, I think it is hard work, and you have to really be dedicated if you want to go down this route as a property investor. It's the most rewarding thing in the entire world, but you have to put the hard work in. And I think a lot of people at the beginning, from what I've seen, don't recognize that. And so they send out their letters to the HMO register, and they wait on this call, and they think that 1,000 calls are going to come in straight away. And it's like, well, no, you've got to work hard. You've got to push through and push the letters through and go again and again. And what they do is they almost give up before they've even started. And I've watched that happen so many times, where people go, it's too hard. I can't do it. And I always find that if they were to just carry on just that little bit further, they would have actually have got the jackpot and hit the gold, and they stop just before that moment. And it's like that meme that I always see of when people are like digging for gold, and they're digging and they're digging and they're digging, and they're just about to reach the diamond, and then they walk away from it. And I'm like, you have only failed because you've stopped. And if you'd have just carried on and kept digging and digging and stayed consistent and trusted the process, you would have actually have got there. So My 3 pieces of advice would be trust the process and keep going, remain consistent and never give up, because if you don't quit, you can never fail. To enjoy the journey and the moments and always remember your why, so important. And to realize when the point is that you're ready to start investing in yourself and not just rely on the free education. The free education is there to get you started, but it's really about now powering through and getting you to the next level of where you want to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I think many of us, when we came into property investing, we balked at the idea of paying so much, or that was me, for property education. But actually, as soon as you make the investment and commit yourself, it pays off. And like yourself, it's not only the information you get, it's the community, like you said, that it's encouraging, that helps you to see a bigger vision than you had for yourself. So yeah, it's really, really phenomenal. So thanks for that. That was really interesting. Do you have a story of some of the people you've worked with which shows the power of this work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. I had an example recently actually that I was thinking about. So I actually also mentor couples as well as individuals, which by the way is another league of its own when you're mentoring a couple, because you almost also, and I didn't realize this by the way before I started it and then I realized it afterwards, that you also have to deal with different types of personalities, because usually people pick opposite people in relationships, and that's the same for business. And so it's like, oh, this is interesting. But what was brilliant about them was they came to me very, very open-hearted, which I always advise people to be. And they said, Athena, we have 0 property education, 0 property knowledge. We don't have much funds. We don't have much time, because they work in the NHS and they've got full-time jobs and it's exhausting. They said, but we know that this is what we want to do. We know that in our hearts. And they of course see me, and I'm a massive advocate for helping people to get into the industry. And I said, well, let me mentor you, let me help you. And they wanted to do rent to rent HMO. And funny enough, they're actually based in Cardiff near you guys.
Oh,
Amazing. Yeah, which is where they're located. And so I literally, the first thing I realized was with them was actually there was a lot around their mindset. So for example, English wasn't their first language either. So they had to overcome that obstacle. But then what they did was I had to start saying to them, you first of all have to believe that you guys can actually do this before you've even started, because you could just hear it in their language that they use. They're like, oh, we could do this, but it might not work, but we could do this. And I'm like, right, stop saying that. You have to change the way you think about things. So they followed me, and I asked them to trust the process, which is what I always say. Whenever I have a mentee or a couple I'm mentoring, I ask them to trust themselves, trust me, and trust the process. So I always say to every mentee I take on. So they did. And I started to teach them. I said, right, let's get the HMO register, which is a story in itself for them in Cardiff. And then what they did was they started to send out their letters. And I got them to send me their first initial letter. And I then sort of helped them to rewrite it based on my experience. And they jazzed it up and all of that. And I remember them saying to me, because it was their first one, they were like, oh, but what if nobody replies to us? And I remember saying to them, oh, well, the world will just implode and it will stop. And, it'll be the worst thing that ever happened. And, it's humor. I'm just trying to make them laugh, to think, actually, if you don't get a first response from your letter, the answer to the question is you then send another bunch of letters. And what you do is you recognize why nobody responded. Was it because of the day of the week? Was it because it was half term? Was it because of the language that you used? Was it because of the envelope color that you used? What was the reasons? And it's about understanding and recognizing that. Now, out of 400 letters, they actually did really well in my eyes. So far, they've received about 7 responses, which from 400 letters is not bad. It's actually pretty good. Yeah. And so therefore I was teaching them, because of course, when they first received their first phone call, they called me immediately. I'm like, what do we do now? Someone's called us. And I'm like, okay, here we go. The fun bit begins. So obviously we had to learn and talk through what we've all been through, Steph, within the rent to rent world, which is the word rejection, which is a fun word to talk about. But actually, once they sort of got over the first 2, which were non-starters, I then made sure that on the third call, they got in front of the person and got to the property to speak to them, which they did. So at this moment in time, that's the stage that they're up to. They've got their meeting, I think it's tomorrow, to actually go and speak to the person who is there, which is absolutely incredible. And I just want to give a bit of a shout out to them, because I think it's so important that they came with no knowledge, came with very little belief, and then they were able to do that. Whereas, of course, I also have other mentees who have the knowledge, have the confidence. I give them a little bit of help, say for the serviced accommodation. I've got another mentee, bit of help, bit of direction. Then she was able to pick up her first one within 3 weeks as a rent-to-rent serviced accommodation. And it's like she just needed the direction of where to find them and go. Whereas I love the stories of the people who come with limited confidence, limited knowledge, and then just by getting those calls, getting them to there. That was in the space of 3 weeks, by the way, like literally 3 weeks, like they coming from nothing to already being in front of a landlord negotiating for their first rent-to-rent property within 3 weeks. Like, I think that's a pretty big deal for them. So yeah, I'm very, very proud. But yeah, I've got tons of stories.
Yeah, no, that's I love that story for all the reasons that you just said. And so, how can people find out more about you? I know you've got your Instagram, which I've now put on the screen.
Yeah, thank you so much. So there's two ways you can get in touch with me, and I have two different passions, as it were, but they're joined as well. So you can find me at my actual personal Instagram, which is Athena Dobson _official. So on there you'll find out all about me, find out about my life, find out about the Property Lifestyle Accelerator. If you wanted to have a conversation with me about that, then just literally DM me the word mindset, and what I'll do is I'll ping you over the first module to my Lifestyle Accelerator course. Because for me, if you don't have mindset, you don't have anything. But then second to that, which is what Steph touched on earlier, I'm also the CEO and host of Girls in Property. And the reason I started that was, I don't know how many females are listening to this, but I remember my first ever networking event, and it was just a sea of men. There were 45 people in the room. 43 were men, 2 were women. I'll never forget it. And so I decided to start the Girls in Property podcast. Then did then now do events. I've got my next one coming up, which is the Christmas Gala on Saturday, the 7th of December, if you wanted tickets for it. I've also got a Girls in Property community group just for us women, uniting us in the business and property and construction world. So get in touch with me. Just DM me the word community over in Girls in Property on Instagram if you wanted to hear more about that. And yeah, it's been nominated recently by the Blue Bricks Awards for Community of the Year, which is amazing, but also terrifying, because I've seen who I'm up against. And Girls in Properties only launched on January 15th, 2023. And I'm up against some players who have been in the industry for like 20 years plus. And this is my mindset where I'm like, what chance has little old me got? But I've got to shift my own mindset with that.
Yeah, no, huge congratulations. That's a massive achievement to get nominated like that.
Thank you. But yeah, that's where to find me. It's Athena Dobson _official or Girls in Property on Instagram. That's the best way.
That is fabulous, because I know that if they come there, they're going to get a lot. And you were mentioning that you have in your accelerator, if they message you, they can also get the first module free.
Yeah. So my biggest thing is that I know people sometimes talk about it quite a lot, and it can get a bit mundane sometimes hearing it. But the absolute truth of it is, there is absolutely no point in about learning about buy-to-lets, serviced accommodation, HMOs, rent to rent, if you do not have the right mindset. Because what will happen is if your mindset's not in the right place, you won't be able to map out your goals in the correct way, which is module 2, to then learn about the methods, which is module 3, then learn about money, then learn about members, then learn about like how to multiply your income. You just won't be able to do that if you haven't got the right mindset. So I talk a lot about using the word yet. So, you know, it's like people will always say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough knowledge, and I don't have enough money. The 3 that I get all the time. And I'm like, yet. That's the word you've got to use, yet. And so that's what that module is really great for. It's about cultivating that growth mindset, abundance mindset, and really believing that you can do it, to then move on to mapping your goals and getting on with it and getting the right strategy.
Brilliant. No, that sounds amazing. So Athena, as we draw to a close today, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
I would say that if you're listening to this and you are at a crossroads now as to thinking whether or not you should do this or whether or not this is the path for you, the best advice I can give you is go for it. So that's what I'd leave you with. I'd say go for it, because I believe that people are born very differently. People have very different personalities. If you have something in you that says there must be more to life, and you're sitting there and you're nodding, or you're sitting there and thinking, yes, I have that fire in my belly, there is more to life, I guarantee you, if you follow that road and you find the right people to surround yourself with and to be encouraged by, you will get to where you want to be. And just know that there is more to life than just a job where you go to work, you come home. I'm not saying you have to leave your job, but you can certainly buffer your income and just trust the process, enjoy it. Remember your why and just go fly. And if you ever need a community and you're and you wanted to come and join the Girls in Property and you're a female listening to this, then come and join.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Absolutely. Just get started, and you can follow up with Athena. Tune in to the Girls in Property podcast for one, and DM Athena to find out more about the Girls in Property community, the retreats, and that first module of the Property Lifestyle Accelerator. So thank you so much, Athena, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure. And Steph, I can't wait to get you back on the Girls in Property podcast. I know we got you on what feels like 100 years ago. So I'm going to be getting you on really soon. So check out Steph's one when it comes out over on Girls in Property.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for watching and for listening. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer. See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.